The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
I'm Vinnie Politan. We are live in Dedham, Massachusetts, outside of the Norfolk County Courthouse, where a dramatic verdict was rendered today. Karen Read found not guilty on every charge that mattered today. It was an unreal scene here in Dedham. Something you rarely see. You know, we cover nothing but high-profile cases on court TV, but this one a little higher than many of the cases we've covered through the years, and in recent years, nothing like it that I have ever seen, and a big part of it was the public reaction, not just online, but here at the courthouse. And that is the subject of our investigation tonight. Take a look at what happened earlier today.
Murder in the second degree. What say you? Is the defendant at the bar guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Defendant not guilty or guilty? So say you, Mr. Foreman? So say you all? Jurors, hearken.
For a better outcome. Woo! I'm excited. I'm so happy. I've been waiting for this we all have for a long time. Game over.
This is Massachusetts history. Massachusetts history. We got the justice that we deserve for the O'Keefe family as well. We send our love.
An incredibly dramatic day. The emotion inside the courtroom, the jubilation outside of the courthouse. That's all from the Free Karen Read movement. Obviously, a much different situation for John O'Keefe's family. They exited out of the back. You can imagine what they're going through tonight. But the bottom line is, Karen Read, presumed innocent, was found not guilty. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation. Karen Read was found not guilty. Who is responsible for John O'Keefe's death? Is that a question that we can answer tonight? Is that a question that can ever be answered? Joining me tonight, live in Dedham, longtime Massachusetts attorney Rick Grundy and criminal defense attorney Peter Ellikin. Also joining us, attorney Wayne Dennison, along with journalist Rebecca Lavoie. She's also the host of the Crime Writers On podcast. Great to have everyone here. Peter, I'll begin with you. Is this a question that can be answered tonight, or is this a question that can never be answered?
I suspect it will never be answered because, as Karen Reed supporters would say, the police did such a botched job of the investigation that they lost an opportunity to find any evidence of another person. And a couple of just quick classic examples: body is found right in front of the house. The chief inspector of the chief investigation, Proctor, doesn't even bother to go into the house, see if there was any evidence of violence there or DNA or whatever. Doesn't ask any questions of the witnesses. And so, therefore, that is lost forever and all time. You're not going to find fingerprints or DNA in there several years later. And that would have also been helpful for the people who truly believe that she is guilty. Wouldn't that have cleared everything up if you had a really good investigation and they had checked out the house and they had interviewed everybody and looked for cameras across the street? I think that would have helped both sides in this battle. But I suspect that evidence just isn't there anymore. And there's all the people in the house who were supposed to turn in their phones, their cell phones, to be examined. Every single one of them either erased their phone or they threw it in the garbage. And again, whenever there's evidence that could have settled any of this, again and again we see it disappeared or gone. So I would say that I suspect, you never say never, but I suspect we may never find the other person if there was genuinely, truly some other person.
Rick?
I agree with Peter. You know, there's a reason they say the first 48 hours. It can certainly go longer than that if you get into deeper kinds of forensics or anything. But it has to happen in real time to the crime. Didn't happen. Likely it cannot be recreated in any way that would get to the bottom of it. More important, who's doing it? Who would be doing it? Norfolk DA's office isn't looking into this anymore, so I think even if it could be done, it has to be somebody who has the resources, and those people aren't looking.
Let me ask you, Wayne Dennison, there's a civil case.
Yep.
Wrongful death. Will information be uncovered in the discovery phase of a civil case that could shine more of a light onto this issue and perhaps help answer that question?
There is some likelihood that in the civil case you will get some broader discovery. You certainly have the ability to subpoena witnesses, and many of the witnesses who testified the first time will be, I think, subpoenaed again in the civil case. In terms of who is responsible for the death of John O'Keefe, from a criminal perspective, I don't think we're ever going to get there. Absent a confession of some nature, we're never going to get there. But remember, O.J. was acquitted. Nevertheless, he was settled with an enormous civil verdict. And we have another case coming, and we're going to have a case that has a very different standard of proof. It's no longer, are we going to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? It's, is it more likely or not? And this is a very different case going forward.
Rebecca Lavoie, let me ask you, that civil case, the broader discovery goes in both directions. So there's an opportunity, obviously, for the O'Keefe family in a wrongful death to depose Karen Reed and perhaps uncover more information. On the other side, to defend herself in a civil case, she may be able to depose people that were not subjected to questions and perhaps try to subpoena records that were not subpoenaed or accessed during the criminal defense of Karen Reed. What are your thoughts about answering the question, who is responsible for the death of John O'Keefe?
Well, I just want to say I'm very gratified that the jury saw the same trial that I saw when rendering their verdict. It really seems like they did. But the one thing that I think that has been largely forgotten, even though it's come up in little moments, is that, you know, the defense and the prosecution received 3,000 pages plus of documents from the federal investigation into something that very much related to this case. And Judge Beverly Cannoni really limited the defense in how they could use that material, the questions they could ask, the direction they could go with it. I'm curious to see how those limits don't apply during a civil case, because I really believe the defense knows stuff that they have not been able to say that they know. The gag order in place, Beverly Cannoni's restrictions in place, and I think that those depositions in particular could lead to some interesting results.
Yeah, Rick, what do you think about a civil case uncovering something here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, as you mentioned, Karen Reed is going to be deposed. Karen Reed is going to finally speak and be asked direct questions with respect to this, under oath. Interrogatories, any kind of written materials that they may have, which obviously the defense doesn't have to turn over. They have to turn over into a civil case. I want to just pick up on what Rebecca had to say, because that's a lingering question in my mind, is how did the federal government get involved in this? Clearly somebody dropped a dime, but people are dropping dimes into the U.S. Attorney's Office daily, and lots of them, and very rarely do they get picked up. This one got picked up and ran with it. I think the fact that in retrospect we can look back and realize they were investigating the Birchmer murder at that time, so when more questions came up about Norfolk County, that may have been the additional incentive. But there was information that was developed and was used in this trial that you would never get in a state trial for murder. So I'd be interested to see how that will now come into play in a civil case.
Peter's chomping at the bit.
Yeah, and I agree that there's all kinds of evidence going to be coming out, hopefully different evidence. I still don't know whether they're going to really get to the absolute bottom of this, but it is going to be revealing. And I agree with what Rick said, that people complain about cops and prosecutors all the time, but they don't, to the feds, and the feds don't open up an investigation. But the fact they were actually had grand jury and bringing it, there had to be something there, something to motivate them to actually have people hauled in before a grand jury, one after the other, and hiring independent investigators, etc. And it's been a mystery to us now, and I would love to see if that's ever ultimately revealed.
All right, our guests are going to stay with us. When we come back, did the media interviews help Karen Reed?
The Court TV podcast will return.
Her statements to you will confirm what you already know from the science and data, what you will already conclude from the facts independent about what she did that night. Her word is simply confirmed, and her judgment is sound. And you're going to hear from her own lips in many of her statements, her admissions to extraordinary intoxications, her admissions to driving the Alexis, her admissions to being angry at John that night. And I did say her admissions that she told.
As Hank Brennan, the special prosecutor, in his opening statement telling the jury about Karen Reed's alleged admissions that she made in interviews with the media. Big difference between trial 1 and trial 2. Hank Brennan used them throughout the course of the case. Take a look.
The final count of my alcohol intakes, probably about 5 or 6 or 4. The drinks that they were pouring me at McCarthy's, which is where I consumed most of the alcohol, was the weakest vodka tonic. I mean, I'm not as clear as I would be if I hadn't been drinking. I mean, I had drank, so, and that led me to question, like, could I have hit him? Did I run over his foot or hit him in the knee? Did I incapacitate him? So when John got out of the car at Brian Albert's house, he took my full vodka soda, which is sitting in the cup holder. I mean, I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him? Could I have tagged him in the knee and incapacitated him? He didn't look mortally wounded as far as I could see, but could I have done something that knocked him out and in drunkenness and in the cold didn't come to again? Did he come and hit the back of my car and I hit him in the knee and he was drunk and passed out and asphyxiated or something? He asked, why was I saying, could I hit him? Did I hit him? He's in the general vicinity of where I last saw him. No one's coming out of the house. Jen's telling me nobody's seen him. So I'm thinking, Jesus, was I starting to pull away and I ran over his foot? Totally more than Jen McCabe. Jen McCabe, it's me or her. Either I'm going down, Jen, or you are.
Prosecutor played them, leaned on them heavily during the course of this case, arguing to the jury that these were admissions by Karen Read. But we know the verdict now. The verdict was not guilty. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Did the media interviews help Karen Read? It was evidence brought in by the prosecution. The jury had to ask a question. Is this evidence in the case? They asked it, and the answer was, yeah, consider it like any other evidence. So, but did the media interviews end up helping Karen Read? Still with me here in Dedham, Rick Grundy, Peter Elkin, two amazing attorneys, along with Wayne Dennison. You saw him win the Johnny Depp case, and Rebecca Lavoie, an incredible journalist. Okay, let me ask you, Wayne, is it possible that the media interviews helped Karen Read?
I think it might have helped Karen Read in the court of public opinion and to garner some more sympathy for her views. But in terms of the trial strategy, I can't envision that that was helpful testimony. And I know she wasn't ultimately going to testify, and this was all the jury was going to ever see of Karen Read, but they cherry-picked what were, in fact, admissions that were quite damaging. And I can't envision a set of circumstances in which you would put your defendant in front of the national media and talk for 40 hours. I can't believe that it actually helped.
Rebecca Lavoie, what are your thoughts about the media interviews here? Did they end up actually helping Karen Read in some way?
It's very hard to say no to that question, considering the result that they got at trial. I thought this was incredibly risky, incredibly dangerous, but I thought other things that the defense did at the beginning of the trial were also really risky. Looking back at the clips that Hank Brennan played in court right now, one thing really sticks out to me is that the clips he chose were about collision, about John's injuries, about Karen's state of mind. And then all of the knockout evidence the defense showed was about a lack of collision, how John's body didn't match the accusation. And so in some ways, the clips kind of centered something that the defense really wanted the jury to pay attention to, and made a lot of the prosecution stuff, to me, seem a little bit more like unimportant minutia. I mean, they were playing a pregame over the third-party culprit defense, and the defense was thinking, no collision, no collision, no collision. So in some ways, those clips kind of spoke to what they were trying to do, and no one's more surprised than me, because I would never advise someone to give those kinds of interviews before a trial.
All right, Rick Grundy, let me ask you, this new prosecution was different. This was the additional evidence that was supposed to help it and make it even better, but they had a much worse results in the second trial. You know, Hank Brennan and these clips, worse than Adam Lally and his reverse video. What are your thoughts? Do you think they could have helped Karen Read in some way?
I've racked my brain as to more along the lines of why they got her out there and did all these interviews to begin with, and how they thought it might help. The only thing I could think of, and I think is a little far-flung, is that just to expose her to people more than she already had been by the first trial, to build up that wave of support that we saw here today in its conclusion. But still, I think if you're sitting next to her off camera and you hear the things she's saying, I would, after the first one, said, this is not a good idea, and stopped. So I don't know what the thought was on the defense side. On the prosecution side, I think it was a good idea. I think they made the most of it. I think this case, frankly, was lost by the district attorney's office and the investigators very early on. They paved a road that you just weren't going to get a successful prosecution down.
Peter Elkin, what do you think of these clips and what impact they had?
Vinny, as I've said before, I'm almost like a gushing, giddy fan about how remarkably great lawyering we saw from both the prosecution and the defense on this case. But this is the sole piece that I just don't get. The conventional wisdom has always been that you don't have your defendant, your client, talk to the media. Even if they're innocent, they could make a slip of the tongue. They could contradict something they said earlier, something they say could be misinterpreted. And therefore, And this, I was watching the trial. I thought, this is the reason why you don't do it. There's a reason why the prosecution brought up all these clips and the defense didn't. I think that they were a major helpful piece for the prosecution, but again, it didn't carry the day. It wasn't a knockout blow. There was too much on the other side. But I'm going to be curious to see if I can ever get to the bottom, get this question answered about, these are such great lawyers. There had to be some good rationale they had to have her talk to the media. I don't get it, though.
Rebecca Lavoie, I think this is a good argument for you and I, the next time we're covering a trial, before the trial, to convince an accused defendant to come speak with us, right?
Absolutely. I mean, maybe you can say it worked for Karen Read, so maybe you should try it. It's really interesting because one of the things I think that we are discounting is the perception of Karen Read. Like, I'll just be honest, like, women can't win in this way. They're either too reserved or too emotional, too hysterical or too icy. And Karen Read has been described in a way that really bothers me as off-putting. Her demeanor in court is wrong, that kind of thing. The one thing that these interviews did was they connected the jury to a human being. I don't know if you noticed this, but in one of their questions to the judge, they actually called her by her first name, Karen, not Ms. Read, not the defendant. And it's hard not to wonder if some of these jurors watch these clips and they related to her. There's like, this is like someone I know. I could imagine saying something like this. So that just keeps sticking out to me.
Yeah, incredible insight, Rebecca. Thank you so much for that. All right, our guests are all staying. Up next, what impact did the Free Karen Read movement have on the trial?
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
I'm Vinnie Politan, downtown Dedham, the site of the retrial of the century, the location for the verdict for the retrial of the century. What a day, what an outcome. Anytime I hear the words not guilty, I am shocked. I am absolutely shocked. It's because prosecutors choose the cases they want to bring. The defense doesn't choose the case, it's the prosecution. Are you going to pick a case you don't think you're going to win? Well, that's what happened. Karen Read is free. I want to talk about the Free Karen Read movement, which was a big part of this story that I've been covering for years now. It was a movement that was started by a local YouTube journalist, blogger, however you want to label him. His name is Turtle Boy. Aidan Carney started it all, and it grew from there. And there were people that were invested in the case, invested in the outcome, and people who believed that Karen Read was factually innocent and not responsible, and believed that there was corruption, cover-up, and a framing of Karen Read. Take a look.
Well, it's just obvious to anyone with a brain who's looking at the situation and looking at the evidence and seeing what the Commonwealth is covering up, that it's quite obvious that Karen Read is, in fact, an innocent woman.
How stupid do they think we are? How stupid! They're lying to us. But State Trooper Michael Proctor has abused our trust. Free Karen Read! Free Karen Read! Free Karen Read!
Karen Read was framed, and the world knows it. We have been subjected to domestic terrorism. We will not be terrorized anymore. Free Karen Read! Love you, Free Karen Read!
She's been framed.
She has to be exonerated. This is insane. I'm excited to see her have her day.
And the anxiety and the frustration and the corruption and everything that we've been feeling for all this time is
going to be worth it in the end if we finally are able to see Karen get the justice that she deserves. I don't believe she did it. And people are strong about that. They don't want it to happen to me or you or anybody.
I think a lot of people relate to Karen. She could be any one of us. I feel like the corruption in this case is blatantly obvious. I think a lot of people just realize this could be me, it could be her, it could be any one of us standing here.
The Free Karen Read movement happened, and Karen Read was set free. That brings me to the next question in our investigation. What impact did the Free Karen Read movement have on the trial? The movement, did it impact the trial? With me here in Dedham, Massachusetts, Rick Grundy and Peter Ellikin, along with Wayne Dennison and Rebecca Lavoie, also with us to help answer this question. I think this is such an important question, such an important part of everything that has happened here. Peter Ellikin, what impact did that movement have on the trial inside the courtroom?
You know, Vinny, normally I would say that we lawyers were not playing to the bleachers, to the audience, to the sideshow, people outside the public. The only people that count are the jurors. This case, though, it does raise some doubts that I have in my mind that perhaps this was such a highly celebrated case before this trial. A lot of the jurors may have been aware of it. And they may have been aware that the public, we talk about that the public was kind of divided on this and it was very controversial in the community. However, it wasn't 50-50. It was probably 85%. Both polling and informally, I'd say 85% were probably on Karen's side. So the very fact that the jurors very well may have been aware of it, they certainly were. The first trial got so highly publicized. And that may have kind of, impacted them in some way. So this may be the exception, where normally I'd say, I don't give a darn what the public feels. All I care about is the 12 people in the jury.
Rick, the other part of this is over $1 million was raised. Speaking with Nick Rocco, who's helping raise that money. That money was used to pay for experts like the infamous, not infamous, but famous now, ACA experts and other experts that were hired in all this and paying for expenses, et cetera. What impact do you think the Free Karen Read movement had on the trial?
Well, it certainly had a huge impact on the trial that they saw, the jurors saw, for, if nothing else, the very reason you said. Very, very few people are able to mount a defense that's going to cost $1 million, and it just doesn't happen. You know, probably better than 75% of the people who go to a homicide trial have a court-appointed attorney who has to go to the court and ask them for a couple $100 for an investigator. So just that's a practical fact that just definitely had an effect on what the jury saw. I maintain my faith in the jury system, and I think I take them at their oath that the fact that they obviously knew of this tremendous wave of support didn't affect them in reaching their verdict, even though they knew there was a trial that obviously didn't end in a verdict. They knew the crowds were outside, but they took on that responsibility, and again, I trust them in their oath.
Let me ask you, Rebecca, what are your thoughts here on the impact of the Free Karen Read movement on the trial? And I guess ultimately that would include the verdict, which was not guilty on every charge that mattered.
Yeah, a couple of those impacts were like a little bit more intangible, but maybe affected the jury. Like, for instance, I believe that some of the prosecution witnesses were very rattled by the huge crowds outside, and opposite of that, like the defense team was very pumped up by the crowds outside. But I want to talk about Turtle Boy for 1 second, Aidan Carney. There is a instinct towards snobbery in journalism where, we don't like journalists who don't use editors. We don't like journalists who don't fact check everything. We don't like journalists who, behave in certain ways or use certain language in their writing. The one thing that you can't say about Aidan Carney is that he doesn't know how to reach people. He knows how to reach people, and he really works well with his sources. Some of his sourcing in this entire story has been incredible. He was the first person to get an interview with a juror. He was the first person to get an interview with Lucky Loughran. People come to him with information because they know he will doggedly follow up on it, and then he will broadcast in it, and he reaches a tremendous number of people. And the number of people that I've spoken to who have been like, I don't agree with anything that Turtle Boy writes, but he's right about this. It's astounding how many people, even in journalism, have said that to me.
Wayne Dennison, let me ask you, and going back to your trial, where with Johnny Depp, there was similar support, overwhelming support for your client. It wasn't so much of a movement, it was more of an, they didn't need to fund Johnny Depp, right? Johnny Depp's able to fund his own case. Do you think any of this movement or any of the things that are happening outside in any way impact the trial itself, either the way witnesses react, the way evidence is found in a case? What are your thoughts?
My sense is that there is a real possibility that the Free Karen Read movement and the protesters really did help focus the defense counsel on what would resonate with other people, what resonated with likely jurors, what resonated outside the courtroom. I tried a case in that courthouse during various points in which the protesters were out front for Karen Read. And I was aware of it at almost all times, irrespective of the fact that I was trying a different case. I can't believe that the jurors didn't have some knowledge that these people were adamantly in favor of the Free Karen Read movement and adamantly in favor of the acquittal of this defendant.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not saying it in a negative way at all. But as Rebecca pointed out, the first thing she said, right, that the jury and the verdict from the jury reflected what was happening in the public. What happened with the jury reflected what was happening in the streets. Same thing in the Johnny Depp case. Same thing in the Alec Murdaugh case. So there's this thing that's in sync. But here it was the movement that was a little bit different in this case than the other two that I just referenced. All right, our guests are staying with us. Still to come, how about this question? Will this trial help or hurt the lawyers' careers?
This is the Court TV Podcast.
Decided to stop her Lexus, decided to put it in reverse, decided to accelerate 75% in the exact same direction of where she left him, and then hit him, and he died.
The Commonwealth has struggled to try to prove that John O'Keefe ended up in Brian Albert's front lawn because he was struck by a vehicle. They have failed.
You were all selected as jurors because parties entrusted that we do a proper investigation of this case within this courtroom. On behalf of Ms. Reed, we have every confidence that you will do a proper investigation.
Defense moves for a mistrial with prejudice based upon intentional misconduct that just occurred before the court and for the jury.
That moment, Robert Alessi making the arguments to the judge with the black gloves on. Amazing. But it was amazing lawyering throughout this case. On both sides, ladies and gentlemen. You can believe what you want to believe. I've been watching lawyers for decades here on Court TV in the highest profile cases in the nation, and I know good from bad. This was all good. Let's take another look at some of the arguments made at the end of the case by the two attorneys who really led the respective sides, Alan Jackson and Hank Brennan.
There was no collision. There was no collision. There was no collision. You folks, not us, nobody else in the courtroom, you folks are the last line of defense. The last line of defense between an innocent woman and a system that has tried to break her, that falsely accused her, that tried mightily to bury the truth. This case was corrupted from the start. It was corrupted by biases and conflicts and personal loyalties that you heard about. And most fatally, it was corrupted by a lead investigator whose misconduct infected every single part of this case from the top to the bottom. So where was John? Wasn't outside, wasn't sitting down, wasn't laying down. There's only one place he could be. We could all say it together if you could talk with me. He was in the house. Let the community feel through your verdict that justice cannot be bent and that it will not be buried. Find Karen Reed not guilty, not guilty, not guilty.
And there was only one person in this entire planet who could help him that morning, to give him a chance. Maybe it was a 33% chance if he met the Isaac Wolf of the world. But to give him a chance. And that one person who could help him that morning was this defendant right here, Karen Reed. And she made a decision. In her Lexus with the shattered taillight, debris field all over the front yard, and John O'Keefe lying helpless like a child on the front yard. She made a choice. She didn't call 911. She didn't run to his aid. She didn't knock on a door. She made a decision about herself. In her Lexus, she drove away. They could see nothing. But the defendant screams, "Stop, let me out." And they look around and they say, "What? Let me out, let me out." She does not see John O'Keefe. She knows where he is. She knows exactly where he is. John O'Keefe is not a body. John O'Keefe is not a buffalo on a prairie. John O'Keefe was a person, and he was murdered by Karen Reed.
Great lawyering on both sides, but as in any trial with a verdict, there's a winner and there's a loser. There's a winning team, there's a losing team. And that brings me to the next question in our investigation. Will this trial help or hurt the lawyers' careers? Still with me, Peter Elkin, Rick Grundy, Wayne Dennison, Rebecca Lavoie. Wayne Dennison, let me go to you. You were on the winning side of a high-profile trial. Johnny Depp, what are your thoughts about this trial helping or hurting the lawyers' careers?
I think it's going to help almost everybody who has been involved in the trial, whether it is on the defense side or the prosecution side. Hank Brennan did a tremendous job on the prosecution side, irrespective of the fact that he lost. Obviously, the defense team was very, very effective at what they did. Ultimately, there will be a little bloom that is going to come off the rose on the defense team, because we still have a ruling from the judge that they had misled her, that they lacked candor with respect to the independence of these ARCA witnesses, and she reserved that issue, but that's not going to materially hurt them overall. The one lawyer whose career it is going to very materially hurt is the district attorney for Norfolk County, Michael Morrissey. You don't see him, he didn't show up, but he just tried the most expensive DWI case in Commonwealth of Massachusetts history, and he will be held accountable for it.
Rebecca, what are your thoughts about the futures for the lawyers on both sides here?
My thoughts are, you never know where a lawyer's going to go. I mean, the guy who prosecuted Pam Smart, Paul Maggiato, represented me in a small civil matter several years ago. That's not to knock on him, but that's, he's not, on the front page of the New York Times, and that might be his choice, or it might just be that he's sort of settled in after that, after being a prosecutor. The one thing that Karen Reed's team has that Hank Brennan did not have the benefit of having is that they are able to play characters in this story, right? They have a very close relationship with Karen Reed. You have Alan Jackson, the storyteller, Yannetti, the benevolent defender. You have Alessi, the technician. You have Little, the sort of quiet, confident, supportive person. It very much read like a family, and that's kind of a fantasy people have about how their lawyer is going to, be with them, defend them. If you've seen the viral clips online, they spent all this time outside of court together, cooking dinner together, going out to eat together, and they were able to portray that image of they have her back. So I think for the four of them in particular, if you can afford it and you want a lawyer that has your back, that's the phone call I would make.
Peter Elkin, let me ask you about Hank Brennan. He's a criminal defense attorney, right? He was brought in as a special prosecutor. What do you think the impact is here?
I think it's an extraordinary boom for his career. And this isn't a case where, you're the loser, you lost. Obviously, you messed up, you didn't do that good a job, they beat you, they did a better job. No, not at all. I think all of us observers, and I've been a member of the bar 44 years, and I've seen, and I keep saying I sound like a giddy, gushing fan here, but this was lawyering at its highest level. It was an absolute master class for me to watch. And someone like Hank Brennan was, I think he did everything humanly possible, did a fine prosecution job, and it's just a matter of, I think there was just too much reasonable doubt, and you can't hold that against him at all, and therefore I think it boosts his career. He goes back as a criminal defense attorney, having impressed everybody. The other guys are also having impressed somebody, so I think it's a boom to everybody's career, and I agree with what I believe Wayne said, that the chief DA, the elected official here, Morrissey, who really was not actively engaged at least with the public here, made some bad decisions at the beginning. That business about charging her with murder was just, I don't know if that was a political move or whatever, but there was never any basis for that. There was never any evidence brought in for that, and that was the one political kind of embarrassing move.
Absolutely. Rick, what are your thoughts here for the future, for the careers for these lawyers?
Well, let's not forget that they were all well-established attorneys to begin with, doing very well by themselves. And, unfortunately, probably, like myself, have more career behind them than in front of them. But I agree. The worst-case scenario that could have happened for Hank Brennan was that if you guys weren't here and if this didn't have the notoriety it did, and it went to trial and people read, they had opening statements, and the next thing they read was that there was a not guilty verdict. That would have been bad for Hank Brennan. They watched it. They saw what he did. They know he did a great job.
All right. Speaking of doing a great job, what a great job by our guests tonight. Peter Elkin, Rick Grundy, Wayne Dennison, Rebecca Lavoie. Thank you all so much. Really, really appreciate it. The trial is over. The story's not over, but the trial is over. Karen Reed, not guilty. What happens next here? There may be a civil case, there may be other things, but the bottom line, this was a woman claiming her innocence and fighting for her freedom. Our system worked. It worked because prosecutors were put to the test. They need to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. They did not convince the jury. You don't convince the jury, the defendant goes home. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for watching. We will keep digging for answers, bringing you verdicts as the investigation continues.
There you have it. If you want to see more in-depth reporting on the latest true crime stories, you can see me every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Thank you so much for downloading. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.